Hi there, it's Brian Sebastian, Movie Reviews and More, Worldwide TV Network, IT247 out of Franklin, Tennessee, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google TV, Apple Plus. And now, he's back again. This is always a fun show. Usually Sherry Nelson gets a chance to do the interviews. I'm so terrible at them. I just let everybody, all the girls do everything, and I kind of just jump in. But on this one, it's a special one. Not only is Mickey Burns award-winning, not only does he have 2 books now, last time I saw him, he only had 1 book, which was good. And yes, Mickey, I actually got a chance to read your book. I did order it, and it was really, really good. So not only was it from the projects to the profiles, I'm kind of speechless today. It's one of those things where it's the one and only Mickey Burns. Mickey, welcome back to Movie Reviews and More.
Thank you, Brian. Honor to be on your show. It always is. And I can't think of a better thing to do this evening than to join you on your show.
Hey, talk about your first book a little bit, because did you know you were going to write another one so quickly, so fast?
Well, yeah, I'll talk about the first one. Let me give you the seed for the second book, because with the pandemic in the spring, it gave us time to be able to focus a little bit on the second book, and how that came about. I've had the same photographer on the set of Profiles for 20 years. And one day in March, during the beginning of the pandemic, as we were completing an interview, his name is Robert Brunfeld. And I said, Robert, how many photos have you taken in and around the set for the past 20 years of Profiles? And he said, Mickey, I have no idea, but I'm going to go home and check my computer. I'll call you tonight. So he goes, I get a call from Robert that night. He said, Mickey, I have 14,562 photos that I've taken around before and after the interviews over the 20 years. So at that point, I called Eileen Shapiro, whom we both know, the publicist.
Yep.
And have to do a coffee table book. And she contacted our publisher, New Haven Publishing. And within a week, we had a deal to do a second book. And we spent a lot of time on it last summer because interviews were slow. And we were able to complete the book. I guess I started it in April. And by the end of the summer, we had our coffee table book. And it just came out the beginning of this month.
Congratulations. I remember talking about that, writing it and everything. That's actually amazing. But the thing is, I don't think you ever had time to do the first one, but you had time to do the second one, right?
Yeah, well, the first one took more time because the first one was a memoir of my life and my career. So I started the memoir at like 11 years old in real time, and then moved up all the way to the current show that we do now, Profiles, in New York City. And I talk about growing up in the South Beach housing projects in New York City. And, I did an interview the other night, Brian, and the reporter asked me, he said, I watched some of your interviews on Profiles online. And he said, where did you get the swagger from? Which I never thought about it, and the confidence that you show on camera. Where did that come from? And it reverts back to my beginnings at the South Beach projects. Because if you remember, there's a scene at the beginning of Saturday Night Fever when John Travolta is walking down the street with the paint can, with that swagger, with the leather jacket. And I write in my book, when I was growing up in the South Beach projects, we all walked like that. Because if you didn't, you'd get beat up every 2 days, So you had to develop that confidence and that swagger, whether you had it or not. You developed that appearance out of survival. It's a survival technique.
So Mickey, nonstop Terri Marie out of Redondo Beach, California, just joined us. So Terri,
hi, how are you?
Mickey Burns.
And
Hi, Mickey. How are you?
Who is this?
This is Terri Marie. How are you? I'm Brian's co-host. How are you?
It's a pleasure meeting you tonight.
Nice to meet you too.
Sure, Redondo Beach.
Yep.
Well, that's a good place to be. No snow in Redondo Beach.
Actually, it's sunny today. It's really warm out. I mean, I'm literally 2 blocks from the beach, so it's always beautiful here. Yeah. So.
Well, Brian and I will be over for lunch tomorrow.
Hey, Mickey, talk about this. Talk about
Yeah.
what it was like when you were able to get back into the studio, because Terry and I and Victoria, we got into the studio for a while and it was fun. And the first thing people said, it was good to be around, and they looked around and it was like strange feeling. Did you have the same type of situation?
I really didn't. It's funny when you're doing it as long as I've been doing it. We've been doing a show for 20 years, and I had on camera shows with Time Warner and Fox before that. So it's a funny thing because sometimes you can take a hiatus of 4 or 5 months even. But boy, when the lights go on and the cameras start rolling, for me personally, it was like you never left. That's the way it was for me.
Yeah. Who was your first guest back in the studio? And how did they feel about going back into a studio? Were they wary?
Yeah, I think it was Howard Bloom,
Yeah.
the publicist, Michael Jackson's publicist, and Billy Joel's publicist. But we social distance. Everybody had masks on. We stayed our 6 feet, and we were very careful. And some people opted out of coming into the studio to do the interviews, but others seemed okay with it as long as we were careful and practiced social distancing. And you can't do that.
Yeah, we did the same thing on our radio show.
Yeah.
And it was, there were some people that were not comfortable, I think, or they're kind of like a little bit, not totally okay with everything, but we had everything sanitized, temperatures were taken. So
yeah. So I mean, you can do it if you're careful.
Yeah.
And we are, and we continue to do in studio interviews. However, we're missing the volume that we experienced prior to the pandemic. In that, we used to get a ton of book signings where celebrities were coming through New York with their book signings. That is non-existent right now.
Mm-hmm.
Performers, our studio was right down the street from B.B. King's Blues Club, right down the street from the Beacon Theater. And, celebrities would perform there on a weekly basis. That is over right now.
Wow.
So that I would say was 60% of our celebrity feed for episodes came from the book signings in New York City and the performances in New York and Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
And Broadway, we're losing that as well. So it's really a real challenge to keep up the amount of volume that we were experiencing over 20 years. But we're surviving, but we don't have the volume we did pre-pandemic.
Yeah, and it's going to be this way for a while, even with the vaccine coming out because of herd immunity. So we're going to be, unfortunately, dealing with this for quite some time still,
In our case, though, and Brian could appreciate this, because I know you've watched several interviews, Brian. A lot of our interviews are evergreen,
Mm-hmm.
which means, we did something 3 years ago with Darlene Love, and we're going to show it again for Christmas because she's got her Baby Please Come Home song on. And, we could have done that interview 3 days ago. It's evergreen. There's nothing
Mm-hmm.
specific for the time we did the interview. It was an overview of her life and career. So we have 500 episodes, of which many are evergreen. So to show a repeat, a lot of people see it for the first time. They don't even know it's a repeat.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you've done some great timeless, not dated shows.
Well, evergreen. I call them evergreen because they never get old. My Tony Orlando or my Smokey Robinson interviews. You can show them tomorrow, and it looks like it was done yesterday.
Absolutely. Have you had a chance to reach out to a couple of your friends' interviews that you've done, like Cabot or Tony in general?
Well, yeah, I just talked to Tony Orlando. Has a new radio show here in New York City, and Cousin Brucey is on WABC AM from 6 to 10, and Tony follows him from 10 to midnight, and they play nothing but the oldies, But that's why I'm glad you mentioned him, Brian, because he's one of my favorite celebrities I've had on the show, and we've actually become good friends over the years. I've had him on twice. And when I was writing my book, From the Projects to Profiles, I do have Tony Orlando on speed dial. So I went to him and I texted him, I said, which I do all the time, because he's such a great guy and we've developed this friendship. And I said, Tony, I'm just about to release my book. Would you be so kind as to write a blurb for the back cover? And I did that with several celebrities. Within 10 minutes, in my inbox was Tony Orlando with the blurb for the back of my book. That's the kind of guy he is. He's special. He's just a super nice guy. And his show is great. He interviews all the recording artists of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's wonderful. And he's so good at it.
Talk about Brucey. He was my favorite disc jockey. He's still there?
He's still there. He's 87 or something like that. Interestingly, we had Cousin Brucey on twice. The first time he invited us to his home in the village here in New York City, Greenwich Village. And we did the interview right around his Wurlitzer jukebox. What a storyteller he is. He's one of the first people to interview the Beatles when they came to the United States back in 64 or 63, whatever it was. But yeah, he was on Sirius Radio for the last 7 or 8 years. And just about 3 months ago, he's now back at WABC, the station AM that he was on in the 60s, early 60s.
Wow.
He's still healthy, he's vibrant, and if you listen to him, it's like you're listening to the 60s.
Terry, he made, was growing up in Connecticut as a kid, he made me want to be a disc jockey, Cousin Brucey.
Wow. He's another great guy who loves what he does. He just loves what he does. And he's good at it.
Hey, talk about your, the book. Terry chimed in later. All of those photographs, they're priceless. And unfortunately, we got losing a lot of people the last 3 years, which really makes me sad. And they're not being replaced by people. Back in the old days, you would have someone to come up to follow them, kind of like they might be able to take their place in a way. We don't have that anymore.
No.
It's kind of sad.
Yeah, especially in music, but that's just my opinion. But
I agree too.
Yeah.
Music.
On Profiles, I mean, we've had 500 episodes. I would say of the 500 episodes, maybe 50 have passed. And I can go down the list. Eli Wallach, Ernest Borgnine, Davy Jones of the Monkees, Joan Rivers, Peter Tork of the Monkees, and the list goes on. And Ben Gazzara, the actor. It's very sad. It's very sad. But I was so fortunate and honored to have the opportunity to Carol Channing to email these icons, and to have it in my episode catalog is like, it was a thrill of a lifetime, and it's even more precious now that they're gone.
Who was one of your favorite people? Were those people, who was maybe your favorite person that you interviewed of that?
That's passed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Carol Channing was so nice, and she's such an icon. But Dr. Maya Angelou.
Oh yeah.
I mean, when I sat down, all right, I felt like the Wayne's World movie.
Yeah.
My worthy. She's so iconic and so accomplished. But she never made me feel uncomfortable. And on the other hand, I made sure I was super prepared going into that interview, because if I wasn't, she would have noticed it immediately. I don't think it would have went as well as it did, but she was gracious and giving, and gave me a great interview. Ernest Borgnine was an Academy Award winner for the movie Marty. He was Captain McHale in McHale's Navy. Also, tremendous interview. I enjoyed that. But Joan Rivers, I had her on, I think, 3 times. A lot of people didn't realize how smart she was.
I've heard that from several people that met her, and she's somebody that I adore, and I am so bummed that I was never able to meet her.
Yeah, and so sometimes you go into an interview and you're not sure if you should ask too personal questions, because it can kind of ruin the feel and the flow of the interview. But I had to ask her about her plastic surgery because everyone wanted to know about it. And I remember saying to her, I want to ask you about your plastic surgery. I know you had your nose done. And she stopped me right there. I thought she was going to say, I don't want to talk about it. Instead, She said, oh yeah, Mick, I had my nose done. I had breast reduction, liposuction, facelift. And she went down the whole thing. And then she explained why she did it, how much money she spent on it. And it made it very clear to the viewers that, you know, she said some people like golf, some people like going on exotic vacations. She likes plastic surgery, so she always looks her best. And it was as simple as that.
That's good. I mean, like she seems like she's very real and down to earth.
She is.
That's
she
what
is.
yeah.
She's giving, and she said something else too, you know. Because she said all the people that she started out with in comedy. She said the key to success in comedy is never to give up, because you get so much rejection almost on a nightly basis. Every time you do a stand-up, you know, 3/4 of the audience might like you, but there's always that other, you know, third or whatever that doesn't like you. She said, but all of the people that she started out with, if they stayed the course, they all found somewhere in the business to hang their hat eventually. Almost 100% of them. So I guess the lesson is, you know, never give up, and you'll find your place in whatever you're pursuing.
Mickey, she allowed her, my celebrity mom. I was very honored that she let me do that. So when she and Joan, when Melissa would always get together, we always had fun to hanging out, just the three of us, and we would just talk. I was nowhere in their ballpark or anything, but for whatever reason, they always allowed me in when we saw each other. It was always like the three of us. And her charity, as you know, was one of the best charities that I really liked that she used to talk about.
And what was that?
What was that?
It was something to do with the AIDS Foundation, but it was always, they would always go to deliver to the homes. And she was very fond of that. I can't remember the name, but I never forgot that. I always remember that.
You know, and also, you know, she was a prolific author too.
Yeah.
She had several books, and she was so smart, and so she would write them so quickly that I remember the last time I had her on, she had 2 books out at the same time.
Multitasker.
Joan, which book you want to talk about first? You know, and she had no problem. Yeah, let's go to this one, to that one. And she loved to talk about the red carpet, you know. She loved doing that.
I can relate to that. Brian knows how much I miss doing the red carpets because of COVID. Because my thing is, I just love interviewing the celebrities on the red carpet, and it's just, there's nothing like it, and we can't do it.
No, you can't.
It's not the same, you know, through the Zoom meetings and award shows and all that. So I can't wait till they're back.
Right. And also, Brian, I did want to mention that we tried to do a couple of Zoom interviews, and then we realized that's not, you know, we lost the feel of that face-to-face in studio feel. So we tried to do one, and we weren't happy with it. We're going to leave the Zoom to you guys.
Well, no, Mickey, you've been able to get away with it. You're one of the few besides us in the country, because we found my friends, I convinced them to buy the studio in Hollywood, and they built it up during COVID in August. And they said, if you do it like this, I'll bring the show there. So we have the option of doing it in Hollywood. And as you know, we've had Kenny Ardoff come down, Leland Sklar, DJ Badass, a bunch of our friends. And when they get there, like at your studio, they're happy to be there because it is wide open. There's 5 people there, but it's a huge studio, but nobody is there. It's really comfortable. And Terry's always been there. So it's fun to see that, have that feeling, because they're like, we just want to be around people. We know we can't do it what we want to do. And by the end, people are hugging each other. I'm like, I hope nothing goes wrong, but they had a good time. That's the good thing.
And we've never done it with a live audience, Brian. It's always been closed studio. I think we did one interview with a live audience, and that was with LaToya Jackson.
Oh, wow.
That at the 500 episodes and such. Just did the one. I like a live audience. You know, I think it brings a little more excitement to it. But it's a lot easier to focus with no audience. For both the guest, I mean, there's no distraction. You Zoom, focus, that's it. It's one-on-one. Let's go.
I did an interview with she directed Down in the Delta. It was Dr. Maya Angelou. Mickey was the only time I ever wore a tie. I hate wearing ties.
You do? Oh, that's right, you do.
Maya Angelou. And I felt so uncomfortable. The first thing she says, nice tie, young man. And I said, I'm never wearing a tie again. I wanted to rip it up, but it was Dr. Maya Angelou, you know?
Well, again, I had a suit and a tie on for my interview with her.
Yeah,
And
but
I
you
would
look
say,
good in them though.
well, it's just one of those things that I learned. I always felt I should look my best on camera. The network many times asked me to dress down,
Really?
you know, yeah. And I kind of fought them on it and told them that I owe, because I would think 80% of my guests always say to me, thank you for looking so sharp. It's a sign of respect.
Yeah.
But, I think what they want to try to do, the network at one point wanted to contemporize me a little bit, get a younger feel. And I kept telling them the younger people aren't watching television, so don't worry about it. I mean, we had a meeting one time at the network, and I remember they had Nielsen came out with a survey. What's the average age of the New York television viewer? Right? And I had no idea. And it was 57.
Wow.
That was several years ago. So I can't imagine what it is today. So, and I think that's another reason we've been as successful as we have been, is because we produce shows for the people who are still watching TV. Mm-hmm. Right? We're not producing shows for the kids on the computer and on social media sites.
Yeah. Talk about Quest Media and also your alma mater. Have you been talking to them while everybody's been locked down again?
Well, they still had a fall season in Missouri Valley College, and they broke for Christmas, and then they're extending their winter break now rather than having it in February or early March. And they hope to get back to full steam classes, I think, end of February. And they had a full football season, and, everything seems to be going good. I mean, they're a little more isolated in Missouri than we are here. So, no, they're doing fine.
Did you ever see yourself writing a book, though? Not one, but two. Did you ever think you were going to do that?
No, I never did, Brian. I would have never thought about doing it until I had Chuck Barris on my show. Yeah. Chuck Barris was the host of the Gong Show. Was that before your time?
No, I watched the Gong. I watched the Gong Show when I was a kid. When I was a little kid.
So he was the crazy little host, right?
Yeah.
He also wrote the dating game,
dating show,
and the dating game and the newlywed game.
Mm-hmm. I remember those shows. I was a little kid when I was watching them.
He created them.
Yeah.
So in the middle of my interview with Chuck, he said to me, "Stop the interview," and I was kind of surprised. He said, "Mickey, I just want to say something. You have a book in you." And I said, "Chuck, I never have the time to write a book." He says, "You do." He said, "Do what I do. Write one page a day. At the end of the year, you have your book." On a rainy Saturday, I said, let me see, and sit down. I sat down at the kitchen table. I started writing, and I could never write one page. Wow. Because, I sit there, I write in clusters. So I wrote down the first day, I wrote about 20 pages on the first day afternoon. And that was the start. Then I started to write everywhere, on trains, on the Staten Island Ferry, and subways. I would always, every time I had an idea, I'd write it down. And before you know it, I really had the outline of a book that I thought would be interesting.
Did you get a chance to ask him, do you think he was in the CIA?
Well, I asked him that during the interview, and he would not elaborate on it. He wouldn't talk. And he talked about everything else, but he would not. He's like, I don't want to talk about that. Yeah. But I did ask. I said, "Is it true you were a CIA hitman?" Oh, but I did ask him. I said, he wrote the song Palisades Park back in the 60s for Freddie Boom Boom Cannon. It was number 3 nationally. And I said, how was that for you, writing a big hit song like that? He said, "Mickey, I couldn't take it. I heard it on the radio. I was on a highway. I had to pull over on the side of the road." He said, I couldn't, it was the biggest thrill of my life. Bigger than my TV shows, he said.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you have coming up on the show?
Well, what I have coming up, I just finished an interview the other day with Robert Cool Bell of one of my
Yeah.
bands of all time, Kool and the Gang. Because as you know, at one point in my career, I had a band. I don't know if you got that far in the book.
Yep.
I had a band, and we used to do a Kool and the Gang medley in one of our sets. So that was a big thrill for me, Robert Kool Bell. So we just did him. Next week, I'm going on the road to interview Kim Sledge.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because they just celebrated for their big song, I think 40 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So these are milestones in music history for both of them.
Yeah.
You know, Kool and the Gang just celebrated 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
And he's got a new champagne called Lee Kool Champagne. So
I'll
he's
have to try that.
well, it's $100 a bottle, by the way.
That's fine. I gotta try that.
He brought one for me when he came to the interview.
Hey, did you also talk to not Bobby Darin? God, I can't remember. Tommy James and the Shondells.
Yeah, I had Tommy on 3 times. Each time he had a different milestone. The last time I had him on, he was celebrating his 50th year in the business.
Wow.
The time before that, he was celebrating his best-selling book, Me, the Mob, and the Music. So, yeah, Tommy's also on speed dial, and I've become good friends with him. He lives over in New Jersey, and also a down-to-earth, remarkably nice man for somebody who's been as successful as he has. I mean, he's written all those songs that were hits for him. He wrote. And the one thing that bothers me about Tommy James is hasn't been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Wow, I didn't know that.
How do you keep Tommy James out? Not only did he have all those big mega hits, he wrote them all.
Wow.
Did I ever tell you how he wrote, how he came up with the name Moni Moni?
No. Well, and I want to know that story.
Well, I learned it during the interview, but he was told me that they had finished the music, but they couldn't come up with a girl's name to fit the melody, right? So they were at his apartment in Manhattan, and they had to go into the studio the next day to record the song, and they were still lacking the name. And they were standing on his balcony, him and his guitar player, and they looked in the distance, and the neon lights on the skyline of Manhattan was Mutual of New York. Moni Moni, right? So that's how we got the name Moni.
Wow.
And the next day they went in, they recorded it, and it became a #1 hit for him. In 1986, Billy Idol recorded it. It became a #1 hit for him right after Tiffany had a hit with one of his other songs. And the residuals kept pouring in.
Wow.
The songwriters are the people who make all the money. And he, Crimson and Clover was re-recorded by 20 other artists, including Joan Jett.
That's one of my favorite songs ever. I could always listen to it. Always. Mickey, I find myself playing a lot of 60s and the 70s classics now that my mother used to listen to. She used to try to pretend she could sing to them. And I thought she was foolish. Here I am listening to those songs now because they're just wonderful, written songs.
It's amazing. Like Smokey Robinson, some of the songs that he wrote, they're as fresh today as they were back when he wrote. He's written over 400 songs. But I asked Smokey, who, besides yourself, who recorded a lot of his hits himself, who was your favorite recording artist? And he said, without a doubt, without hesitation, Marvin Gaye. He said, Marvin Gaye would take my songs that I wrote and he would Marvinize them. Which what he meant was Marvin took them to the next level. He loved Marvin Gaye.
Who are you hoping to get, for 2021? Who do you want to get?
I'm still trying to get Tom Jones. He just turned 80. He canceled most of his tour for 2020. And that's another thing too. A lot of these people, Tom Jones is on my hit list, and I'll get him next time he comes because I'm in touch with his people. Right now he's on The Voice in England.
Yeah.
and does a great job. And he gets up and sings every episode. He's 80 years old. His talent has not waned.
Mm-hmm.
Longevity. I met him in 1980 backstage. And I said to him then, I said, Tom, why do you work so hard? You don't have to. You don't need the money, but he was working like 300 dates a year.
Yeah, wow.
And he looked at me, he said, Mickey, he said, I'm smart enough to know, and this was 1980. He said, I'm smart enough to know that nothing is going to last forever. And we were in his dressing room. He said, all the people filling up those seats out there's going to come a day when they're not going to want to do that anymore. So he said, so until that day happens or that day comes, he said, I'm going to cherish every moment and give it 100% each and every night. Here he is, 80 years old. His voice is just as good, and he's still going strong. But I think it's his work ethic and his attitude, because people will still pay to go see him because they know they're going to get a great show.
I could see the same thing, Mickey. I don't see you retiring. I see you going another 21, 25 years. I really do.
I thought, Brian, at this point in my life, I'd be playing golf in Florida. But, I have people who've been working with me for many years. So I have a responsibility also. Not only do I enjoy doing what I'm doing, but I have camera people, producers, editors that have been with me, almost photographers, almost 20 years. So it's a team effort, and I feel a responsibility to keep them going as well.
That's how I feel about the girls. They're starting to get it. Huh, Terry?
Yes.
Everybody together. Her, Jessica, who you met, Sherry, and Trixie, the list goes on, because they're all women. And I don't think, unless it's hard to keep women together, but we truly do like each other.
Well, it's a team. It's a team. Now, think about how it will be 15 years down the road if you stay together. You certainly would be like family, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, me and Brian already are. Brian's like my older brother. So.
I've been doing it for 2 decades with the same people. One interesting point about this pandemic, Brian, that you had mentioned before, is even like Engelbert Humperdinck. He's 83 years old, right? He had to cancel last year's worldwide concert tour, and he just canceled this year's coming up.
Wow.
That by the time he's even has an opportunity to go out again, he'll be 85 years old.
Wow.
Right? And he said to me, certainly isn't about the money. I just love doing what I do. And that's out there performing for people. That's my lifeblood. And not being able to do that is disheartening. And it is for him, and it is for a lot of other performers. A lot of them need the money. Not so with some of these Smokey and Engelbert and Tommy James. They don't need the money. They have it already. But they still have this desire to get out there and perform. It's in their blood.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Jones, he can't wait to get back out.
Tom and are they friends now again?
Who is that?
Tom
No.
Engelbert? No, still?
They had, I talked to Engelbert about that during the interview, and he feels like he does want to try to rekindle that relationship. I guess it's a matter of who wants to make the first move. But to answer your question, no, they're still not in touch. They've still separated because, he left Gordon Mills because Gordon Mills was their manager. He managed Tom Jones and Engelbert felt back then that he was giving Tom the majority of the attention, and that's why he left that whole operation. And Engelbert said it cost him millions of dollars in doing so. So, forgiveness and healing old wounds has yet to occur with the two of them.
We got about 5 minutes. Talk about the differences of the books, why they're important, why people should read them, because they should.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. I would let you answer that question. I'll turn that around. Mm-hmm. But I think the memoir is an example of that. No matter how humble your beginnings are, that if you incorporate a discipline, education, drive, that you can really accomplish almost anything you set your heart out to do. I think that's the underlying message of the book. And of course, once you make it, how to stay on top. You know, a lot of people, you can get to the mountaintop, how to stay there is sometimes even harder than getting there.
Yep.
It's always somebody wants to knock you out, always somebody else trying to take your place. You know, and I just had a radio personality in New York, G. Keith Alexander, and he was a big disc jockey back in the 80s and 90s. He said, I never wanted to be the best disc jockey because there's always somebody trying to knock you out.
Yeah.
He said, I wanted to be the most popular one. So I think the book does that. And I've also have a couple of chapters in there for those of us in broadcasting. And I outline some of the mistakes, the common mistakes that people make trying to be a broadcaster, and some of the tips on how to be a better broadcaster. So I think if you're looking for a motivational, inspiring book, it's got a lot of that. If you're looking for some direction in broadcasting, it also has some interesting points as well. My new book, you know, it's a coffee table book with hundreds of photos behind the scenes, during and after the interviews, on the set of Profiles. And we have talked, some of these people have passed on, like Joan Rivers and Teddy Pendergrass and people like that. Plus, they're all major celebrities. So to see them in the context of a TV interview in never seen before photos, it was special to us. And I think people will enjoy seeing their favorite celebrities on Profiles behind the scenes and during the show. Oh, and I also put in, there's also quotes and fun facts with each celebrity that we feature in the coffee table book.
Good. Hey, what would be your advice to those people coming out of college now, wanting to go into communications, into television, radio? What do you tell them?
Well, that's a great question, Brian, because we were both there many years ago. When I was coming out of college, it was BC, which is before cable, right? So the opportunity was very limited. You just had ABC, NBC, CBS, and a couple of small channels. Today, it's a 500 channel universe. So the opportunity today is enormous. You need to have talent. Get opinion on your talent from somebody other than your Uncle Joe.
Yep.
Your mother and your father, because they're going to tell you you're great, or your best friend's going to, gets an unvarnished opinion from somebody in the business, and if you're not that good, well, get some advice on how to get better. Not saying give up, but how do you get better? How do you get good enough to make it in the business? But I always tell people the most important thing is figure out a way. And I spoke at my college graduation back in 2012. And this was one of my key points. Find a way to get your foot in the door. All right. If it means going to run for the coffee, or, being a sound man, or even though you want to be an anchor man, don't be afraid to start at the bottom and figure out a way to get your foot in the door.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's your challenge. Because once your foot is in the door, you'll make friends at the station. You'll make friends at the studio. And eventually you'll get your opportunity. But trying to get it from outside in, I can remember, I'm going to tell you a very 20-second story. When I was at Fox Television, New York City, they had a room off of the newsroom. It was empty. And they would get hundreds of tapes from wannabe reporters and broadcasters around the country. And they would throw the tape in a room. And by the end of the month, the tapes were up to the ceiling. And every once in a while, the news director would come by and say, I want to see this room cleared out by 5 o'clock. And they would bring one of those big garbage cans and they would throw all the tapes. And
Wow.
these are people's dreams.
Wow.
But they didn't have an opportunity to go through all that. And when they really needed someone to fill a void or an opening, they didn't go to tape. They went to people who represent top people in the business, right? So the chances of you getting in from the outside in are minuscule. But like what I did at Fox, I got in at first as a sound man. Once I had my foot in the door, and I told everyone, yeah, but what I really want to do is I want to be a reporter. I want to be an interviewer. I want to be a host. So they know that. And and then eventually the opportunity presented itself to do a news magazine, and they needed somebody to do something. Mickey can do it. He's ready. And then the last thing, Brian, I'll close with this. When your opportunity comes, you better be ready.
Absolutely.
You're going to get one chance.
Yep.
And if you're not ready, forget, you're out of there.
I'm glad you said that instead of me, Mickey, because I used to have to go through some of those as I was a program director for Power 106 in Los Angeles. But when I started at News Radio 14 in New Britain, Connecticut, I was the desk assistant. I worked the work shift till this day, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. on a Saturday overnight. It was just me in the studio. What you said, I learned my craft in that empty studio.
Oh, yeah.
Tape together. There was nobody else doing it.
That's right. And once you get in, no matter what it is you're doing, you're become a sponge. And you learn everything you possibly can so that when your opportunity comes, and it will come, you're ready like you were.
And with that, give your social media links real quick.
I'm sorry, last one?
Your social media.
Oh, very simply, profilestvshow.net, Mickey Burns TV at Facebook, Mickey Burns TV at Instagram. And anybody who would like to see some of our episodes in their entirety, Google NYC Media in New York City. You go to their page. You can go to television, scroll down, you'll see profiles, and you'll see 10 of our last shows in their entirety. For our classic older ones, Brian, go to YouTube, Mickey Burns, profiles featuring Mickey Burns, and we have a lot of our classic episodes there, maybe 100 of them.
Terri Marie, give your social media links.
Terri Marie nonstop on all platforms, and then my website is terrimarieofficial.com.
And with that, I have to always end with this. If you see someone without a smile, like Mickey's, give them because the world needs it. This is Brian Sebastian, Movie Reviews and More. Mickey, thank you for that. Please go out and buy his books. I read the first one. Now I got to get the second one. And we will see you